Okay, so we're doing the second part now on breath awareness. And this is a profound meditation practice in itself. And as I guide it today, you'll see that it's something that can go pretty deep. And it becomes like the breath, awareness of the breath are like the handrails on a staircase, and that staircase is leading up to a higher consciousness, a higher experience of God, a higher awareness of the life that is inside of us. But you keep holding the handrails all the time. You keep aware of the breath and you don't get carried away. At first, those handrails are what stop you from falling off the staircase or being distracted by thoughts and being carried away by thoughts. Later, as you get in and you tune in, those handrails are just the one thing. It's almost like, to change the analogy, you hold on to that awareness of your breath with your one hand or one part of your awareness, and then you may become aware of presence, of God's presence, of life, of your inner body, of the sense of warmth, peace, whatever it is, and you become aware of that too, and you have that in your other hand. You don't let go of this one and just grab that one. And so it's a very powerful practice. The breath itself is not the point. The awareness of the breath is the point. And as you practice this, your goal is to almost dial up your attention. The amazing thing about awareness is that it's so unlike thinking. Awareness is being. Thinking is doing. When you're doing or thinking and you want to do it more intensely, it requires more effort and more stress. In a weird kind of way, awareness, the more you're aware, takes training, it takes practice, it takes discipline, but the more you're aware, the more peaceful, the more you step away from the stress of doing and of thinking and of thoughts and anxieties, and the more you access your true self, your spiritual nature, God. And so it's a beautiful, powerful practice. I want to say this, though, about breath, and that is there's a whole physiological side to breath. It's a real art, and there's this fantastic book, James Nestor, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art, that I highly recommend if you want to learn more about breath itself and how you can use breath as a tool for improved body health and all sorts of things. I'll give you one example. You've got a parasympathetic and a sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight, and parasympathetic is rest and digest. And so you truly rest when you're in your parasympathetic nervous system, and you can get there through breath. So if you, very simply, any breath where the inhale is short and the exhale is long takes you into the parasympathetic. So is relaxing, parasympathetic. The opposite puts you in the sympathetic, which could be something you're trying to do because you're trying to get alert for an important phone call, big meeting, whatever. So if you do a long in-breath and a short out-breath, you stimulate the sympathetic. So it's, and you can almost tell, you can probably feel the stress and the intensity level of those two different kinds of breathing. So that and much else is covered in the James Nestor book. Then there's a lot of interesting spiritual and mystical analogy behind breath. And I'm going to mention this only for one reason. And that is that if you have a sacred approach to your meditation, meaning that you say, wow, I've got my 20 minutes coming up now. This is a very precious, rare time, and it's holy, sacred. You'll get better effects from your time. It's a bit like some people who walk into an old church that treat it as sacred. They really open themselves up to awe, to a wonderful experience. Whereas if you just walk in and say, oh, this is just bricks and mortar, then you don't experience that. And so there is something holy about breath. It's interesting that, just again, looking at the Christian religion, in the book of Genesis 2, the story of creation, which I'm not suggesting is a literal truth of how the earth was created, but it says that God made man from the clay of the earth, meaning the elements, carbon and oxygen and H2O is how man was put together. But then it says, and then God breathed into his nostrils and he became a living being. So it's almost like our breath is the part of us that animates us, that comes from God, even though it's just oxygen, but our ability to breathe. And so there is something mystical about the fact that the breath is God's breath. And there's a beautiful song that says, it's your breath in my lungs. And then in John chapter 20 in the New Testament, after Christ's resurrection, he meets up with his disciples for the first time, and he says, peace, peace, be still. Don't be stressed and anxious about this. And he says, and he breathed on them, and he said, receive the Holy Spirit. So his breath on them was a sign of him putting this presence of God into their hearts. And so there's this mystical side of breath. And those are just two of many thoughts. There's another beautiful story in the book of Ezekiel where it says that there's this army of dry bones, that there's all these skeletons lying in the desert, and suddenly the breath of God goes into those skeletons and they come to life. Talking about, probably on a personal basis, how there can be so many dead areas within us, and then when spiritual life comes into those areas, that we become animated and we become kids again. And so those thoughts about breath are not for you to sit and think about at all during the meditation. They're simply for you to just, perhaps, if you can, you don't have to do this to be successful in meditation, but if you can, approach a breath awareness meditation session as saying something special about breath that I can't fully explain. It's holy. And if you do that, there'll be this extra kind of boost to it, as it were. So just a couple of practical pointers. Firstly, the whole purpose is attention. And as you go, one tool to kind of quieten the mind is possibly even to count the number of breaths you do during which you stay aware and you don't allow yourself to be distracted by thoughts. Can I get to 10 breaths? I think I can get to 10 breaths. And so you're really attentive, and you'll probably get to 10 breaths without thinking about what's for dinner. And then the second practical piece of advice, so the one is you may want to count. The second practical piece of advice is, as you get more and more into the zone, start paying attention carefully also to the space between breaths. So you might go, and then you might have a 3-second pause, or 5 seconds, or 1 second. Pay attention to that and what's happening there. It's almost like you're walking on water when you're doing that. And then as you get more and more into the zone, something else you can consider doing is almost imagine you have a dial and you can turn up your level of awareness. You become more intricately and specifically aware of things in your breath. And here, for example, you could begin to focus on feeling your right nostril for 10 breaths, the breath coming through there, and then your left nostril after that. Don't just stay with one, because some interesting things happen. Interestingly, if you pay great attention to the one nostril, you actually do get more air volume through that nostril, and it affects the opposite side of your brain. But this is kind of physiological stuff that you can read in the James Nestor book. So, right brain is creativity, and so if you breathe through the left nostril more, you kind of stimulate that. But again, that's not what you're trying to do in this meditation session at all, but you might just become aware of that. You might become aware of the temperature of the air. You might become aware of minute feelings. Something else that's powerful, and some folks can't feel things in their noses, you might instead pay attention to your diaphragm, this tiny little muscle at your solar plexus that just moves when you breathe. That might be what you pay your attention to. But either way, increasing your level of attention, and that's the whole practice. And as all of this happens, you might start beginning to sense the presence in you, your presence, your true life, your spiritual nature. And then don't let go of the breath. It's not as if, now the door's open, I'm going through. You continue to hold the handrails of the breath awareness, and you climb that staircase and you increase your awareness.
You have been, and you will be. You have seen, and you will see. You know when I rise and when I fall, when I come or go. You see it all, and you hum the stars, and you move the sea.